Sorry, I just needed to cough there. I was like, oh my god. I just got stuck in my throat, right? Sorry, I just needed to cough there.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll just edit that.
You might have missed us last week, but we're back to talk all things F1 and look ahead to a heavily anticipated Las Vegas Grand Prix. Welcome back to the F1 Era, your weekly F1 catch-up, brought to you by Nerve Podcasts and Nerve Radio. I'm Eden Hannigan.
I'm Rebecca Coulson.
And I'm Honor Dench.
And we're still in our F1 era. So, firstly, who wants to give us a quick refresher about what happened in the Brazilian Grand Prix, just so we're all aware of what happened 2 weeks ago?
I would love to start because personally I really enjoyed that Brazil race. I mean, I thought it was amazing. It felt like a sort of karting race. Like right from the start all the way through there was these battles, challenges. I mean, at the start you had that collision with Albon and Magnussen, and obviously they're both okay, but that brought out the safety car and that led to, you know, Piastri and Ricciardo. They picked up some damage from that, and it just felt like so much happened within the first few laps of that race, but it just didn't stop. Like during the race you had drivers pressing on Mercedes, and then obviously you had that battle to the finish line between Alonso and Perez, which I thought was amazing because you had, you know, Perez got past and Alonso got past, and right to the finish line they were neck and neck, and I personally loved it.
It was almost like a picture finish. It was great.
Yeah.
Unfortunately though, for Mercedes fans, it probably wasn't the best race to watch. I went into this thinking, oh yeah, Lewis is a Brazilian citizen, we'd have sorted everything out, will be great. We didn't. We know the car lacks straight line speed, which is something we'll address in the Vegas preview, as I think it will be flagged there. But another thing that annoyed me would be the attitude of George Russell this race. I think we've seen sort of a frustration between the two Mercedes teammates growing in the last sort of few races, perhaps since the summer break, and it almost felt like every race George has something to say. And you know, it is a tense situation, you're driving a car, you want to win, I'm very aware of that. I just think he questions the team's decisions a lot, and he also is very I think he's very determined to race his teammate. He seems every race to ask, why am I racing Lewis? What is Lewis racing for higher positions, and so on. And it almost feels maybe that you should respect Lewis is a 7-time world champion. He knows what he's doing. You are new to the team. You know, do remember that you have one race win. He knows what he's doing, and to get that to that position, you need to be the second teammate, and you need to work your way up and sort of adapt to the conditions and earn your own respect in a way.
Definitely. I also feel like there was a lot of sort of, I mean, you mentioned like, I don't know, there was like lots of complaining coming from Russell. You know, he was all through the race asking, am I racing Hamilton? Am I racing Hamilton? When, you know, like people have pointed out, the only driver he ever challenges on the track is Hamilton. It's really strange when your teammate is your only opponent. It's like really weird.
It is. I think you are a team. You should be going into the race and looking out for each other and not have this kind of snidey remarks. Almost every week it paints a really bad light on Mercedes in the media. I think, you know, if you look back to last year when Perez and Verstappen had their sort of little argument, it looked very bad in the media. A lot of people were commenting on it, especially when like Max refused to help out Perez. And it's the same way the media are looking at Mercedes this year, because it seems like the drivers aren't that fond of each other. And even though they do apologising after the race, they obviously had their collision not that long ago. I think that was a long time coming, especially with all this sort of commentary over the radio from George. I think that collision was always going to happen. And, you know, I think there could be on for another one.
You have to say as well, all of that complaining as well seemed to come across in vain, because George Russell did eventually retire from the race too. So all of it was kind of for nothing, and all of it was in vain, really. So you just kind of look at it and think, why are you causing so much kind of drama for the team and things like that, and I mean, of course he wasn't to know that there was going to be a problem with the car, but you've got to think, if you're Mercedes, you've got to kind of manage that situation better. And I mean, I think even when they did kind of manage that situation fairly well, because there was a point where Russell did get let through, but it was way too late, and I think every single person who watched the race at that point knew that it was too late for anything to really be done in the situation where they were in. So they kind of messed themselves up, really, Mercedes, with that kind of strategy that they did. And again, because Russell eventually retired from the race, they just kind of got nothing out of the situation at all. So it didn't benefit Russell, it didn't benefit Hamilton at all, and it definitely didn't benefit the team, especially in their chase down for Ferrari.
For sure.
I mean, Ferrari are, I believe, 20 points behind Mercedes now. It could have been a lot less had certain things not transpired throughout the race on behalf of Ferrari. But if you're looking at Mercedes and you're looking at the kind of internal conflict there, you've really got to kind of think that they have to get this under control, because they are fighting for second in the championship at the moment, and there is a chance that this could be the thing that costs them of getting it.
Well, there were loads of kind of problems with the cars and things we noticed in Brazil. You know, when you had those issues with Mercedes, I think they said it was a kind of precautionary thing. They were worried that the engine might blow. Russell and Hamilton were both mentioning issues with tyre management, which was kind of an issue seen throughout the whole race with various drivers. So I do think, you know, as much as that was out of Russell's control, he should think about it as a way like, well, he is behind Hamilton in the championship. He should be thinking about maybe being a bit more optimistic in regard to his teammate, rather than just complaining about him and complaining about racing him.
And we've seen a lot of history with like Mercedes and their teammates. Obviously Rosberg and Hamilton, they fought a lot, but it was a good battle on track. It was an even battle. The two, like, you know, it was fair racing, I'd say. When you had Bottas, I think the favours was always repaid. If Bottas was asked to let Lewis through, the race after, Lewis would always say, no, we're letting Bottas through. I remember that really well. I think perhaps it's George's novelty to Formula One, perhaps it's his determination to get somewhere as quick as his teammate did back in the day. There's a lot of reasons it could be. I think he maybe needs to step down a little bit, reevaluate his position in Formula One. He's a good driver, there's no denying that, and he's very worthy of his seat. I think perhaps he just needs to sit back and look at how he has got so many years left in Formula One. Why act this way now?
Yeah, and Russell's always said that he's respected Hamilton. You know, he wanted to race alongside him, being one of the greatest drivers of all time. And you sort of think, well, the behaviour isn't really reflecting a lot of respect on his part at the minute, and it could just be purely unintentional. You know, when you're in that racing environment, obviously your emotions are going to be, you know, absolutely out of control, but he really needs to rein it in a little bit. And I feel like you've seen it with drivers, particularly when they're younger. You saw it with Max when he was younger. He was quite an aggressive driver, and I feel like as he's gotten older, he's kind of mellowed out a little bit. So hopefully as George gets older and matures a bit more, he'll become a bit more understanding.
And perhaps it's frustration with, he was looking to join the team when Mercedes were at their highest, they were at their peak, they were doing amazing, and he's come into the team and their performance hasn't been as good as it once was, especially since 2021 we seem to have fallen off a little bit. And perhaps it's frustration that the car isn't giving what it gave when he stepped in that one race for Lewis when he had COVID. I can see where he's coming from if it was in that sort of respect, but I also do think that when it was in 2021, he was so angry on behalf of Lewis. He tweeted a very angry tweet at the FIA about the end result of the 2021 Grand Prix, and it seemed that I remember thinking, and then obviously seeing that tweet and then seeing that he was going to be in the second Mercedes car and thinking, oh, like, Lewis has got a really good teammate here. This is a guy that respects him. This is a guy that understands what's happened to him. And then it's transpired that actually isn't the case, and George is quite racing for his own career and his own benefit as opposed to the team's.
Yeah, you definitely see that.
Now, Eden, as our Ferrari fan, I'm imagining that this wasn't a weekend you quite enjoyed?
I turned it off after the formation lap. No, I'm joking. I stayed and I suffered through the entire thing, despite seeing what happened on the formation lap with Charles Leclerc crashing out. And the thing that bothers me is now, obviously, we know what social media is like. People like to spread a narrative that isn't necessarily true or without context. And obviously everyone saw that and thought, oh, Charles Leclerc can't take the pressure, when it turned out to be a Ferrari problem. Because Ferrari said after the US Grand Prix in Austin that they would probably need to change the engine on Charles Leclerc's car either in Mexico or Brazil. And they didn't. And then what we saw was the hydraulics failure, which shut off the engine to stop the engine from blowing up, basically. So that was the end of his race before it even begun. Carlos Sainz also reported some problems with downshifts. So for the main Ferrari team, it was awful. And on the Friday, it looked fairly promising, you know, with practice went really well and the qualifying went really well for them as well. And we thought maybe they've got a chance to do something this weekend, but Ferrari does what Ferrari does, and unfortunately it went badly, and not just for them, but also for customer cars too.
Do you feel like, especially seeing what happened with, I think it was Alfa Romeo, had a double didn't finish due to engine problems, and we know that they use a Ferrari engine. Do you feel like these problems are going to continue into Vegas for the teams?
Well, by the sounds of it, Charles Leclerc will probably have to change that engine, which, I mean, we don't know what Vegas is going to be like. We've seen the layout of the track, but we know that there's going to be all sorts of issues with the track come the Sunday race, or Saturday night race actually, as it is. But I mean, I just look sometimes and I just think, what are they thinking? Because they knew that there was going to be problems with the engine, and yet they didn't bother changing it at all. And then the Alfa Romeos had problems with their engines too. And I just look at it and I just sometimes think, what are you kind of doing here? Because you're in a position to have a really good race, or at least they were in a very good position in the sprint at first, and then went backwards in that, and then in the main race it all completely fell apart. So they've always put themselves in positions, and yet because of external factors outside of a lot of the driver's control, they just can't do anything with it. And they really need to consider that, not just for the Ferrari drivers of Leclerc and Sainz, but also for the customer cars too, because there was a time where stepping into a Ferrari customer car meant that you had a very good chance of, you know, showing your skills off to another team in the paddock if you had potentially a risk, you were at risk, or your career was at risk. But now that doesn't seem to be the case, because Alfa Romeo are nowhere at the moment. And I mean, I don't think Haas had a particularly awful weekend. I think Hülkenberg qualified really well, but they couldn't really do much with it in the race, because obviously Magnussen was had the incident in the first corner with Albon, and Hülkenberg was outside the points once again. So they need to really have a look and see what they're doing in terms of reliability, because this isn't the first, and it definitely won't be the last time we see this Ferrari across the board.
Yeah, for sure. It's a bit heartbreaking to watch, I imagine, for you.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're in such a close fight with Mercedes in the championship, you know, like I said, those 20 points behind, and you just have to look at certain places, like Charles Leclerc in Bahrain in the first race. That was 18 points gone. It was like he was running in a podium place then, and it went away from him. There are many different examples of Ferrari, you know, where they could have maximised a result, whether it be through strategy or reliability issues. They've not done that, and you just have to think like I mean, I said it in the first race, first podcast that we did here. I don't think they're going to win a championship for the next 15 years, and I stand by that, because you need everything to go in your way. And while they do have two very good drivers, or shall I say one driver who I believe to be fantastic and another very good driver, there's just something there that's not working, and every single time it seems to relate back to the team, and it's just not good enough at the moment.
I think one thing people miss with Formula One is that it is a team sport. Okay, yeah, there's one driver on the grid, or two, but there's one in each car. There's a whole team of people behind I'm so sorry. There's a whole team of people behind that driver that are there doing their pit stops, doing their strategy, building the car back in the factories. All these people contribute to a win and to points. And okay, the driver may be, fantastic, as you say, but the team is clearly lacking something.
And I think lots of people thought when Ferrari had that reshuffle with their management and their engineers, people thought, oh, maybe this could be a sign that things are going to get better, but it doesn't seem like things have got better, and maybe they've even gotten worse. So it makes you wonder, like, what will it take for Ferrari to become that championship winning team again?
There's like a sour nugget in that team that they need to find where it is and filter it out, because they've changed, like you say, the management. The drivers have changed over the years. I don't think they're the problem either. There's something deep within that team that, probably the strategists.
But they changed their head strategist at the start of the season too.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to circle it back to that, but again, that seems to be a loose end as well. And it's tough because they came very close in 2017, 2018 with Sebastian Vettel. But the thing that undid Sebastian Vettel's run was a mixture of unreliability, poor strategy decisions, and then ultimately, as we saw in 2017, that crash in Singapore, which was the fault. I believe the fault lies for a large part with Sebastian. So, and that was the closest they've come, and I don't see them getting anywhere near that again, because they can have a good start to the season or a good end to the season, but they can't do it consistently, and they need to find that consistency, and it takes a while. It takes a long time. It took Mercedes how many years to win their first championship? I believe it was 4. And Ferrari have had a lot more time than that, but with Mercedes in their dominance, everything was right for them. They had the right amount of they had the right drivers to push the drivers, they had the right team principles, they had the right strategies, and even though it wouldn't go their way all of the time, they were still strong enough to be able to get the results when they needed to and maximise the results of that the car could give. But Ferrari just don't have that, and it's hard to pinpoint a specific reason why, but there needs to be some ongoing reflection in Maranello come the end of the season, because this has gone on for too long, and they really need to have a look and see why they are struggling so much.
It has gone on too long, and do you know why? Because I think that both Sainz and Leclerc are very suitable at being a world champion driver. I think they both have it in them to win a world championship. I just think that the team isn't behind them on that.
Definitely, yeah. And also it's quite a heartbreak, because you think when it comes to drivers like Leclerc particularly, he is never really going to leave Ferrari. He's spoken very openly about the sort of family connection he has with Ferrari, and he wants to win a championship there. And it's just frustrating, because obviously he wants to win a championship and he might have better luck elsewhere, but he has this tie to Ferrari, and you just want him to win with them.
Yeah, from the empathy sort of side of it, you want him to win because of it's the story, it's the loyalty to the team, it's the family connection. It's almost like recipe for a movie, really. You want to see him win. It's just a shame that it's not happening yet, but it could.
And it would be such a shame if when Leclerc leaves Ferrari that would be heartbreak, I think.
Yeah, for sure. It's important to probably point out that all our predictions for the Brazilian Grand Prix were actually wrong. We didn't do so well last week.
Yeah, Hamilton win didn't happen.
No.
Max Verstappen not winning in the sprint race didn't happen. Ricciardo doing very well.
We don't talk about Ricciardo. He got caught up in lap 1 and never recovered.
No.
It's just a shame, really. It looked to be a promising weekend, really, when it first started out, but unfortunately kind of didn't go the way, unless you're Rebecca, some people would have hoped for, or an Alonso fan as well, actually, because we have to give credit to him for that incredible fight for P3. Him holding off Perez on the last lap was possibly one of the best bits of racing I've seen all year. So
another great race from McLaren as well. They're sort of consistently doing well at the moment.
Yeah, it's a shame for Piastri that he was caught up in the lap 1 thing, because that really kind of ruined his race. But Lando's doing a fantastic job again. He's starting to become the max of old in terms of driver of the day voting. It seems like Lando can just happily cruise to P2, kind of do not a lot wrong in the race, and then suddenly he'll get the driver of the day vote, which, I mean, I think there were more deserving people to win that in Brazil, but he's doing a fantastic job, and I think it's very clear that he is possibly one of the next in line to take the first win. It's got to be him or Oscar sometime soon.
Driver of the day is such a nice little addition to the weekend, but it was always unpredictable. I mean, I remember, what was it a couple of years ago when Raikkonen won it for, even though he DNF'd, it was just because it was his last race and everyone decided to vote for him.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's whether you vote for the driver that actually does well. The P2 result is a great result, so you vote for him. Or do you vote for someone that maybe demonstrated a really great bit of racing?
Or just vote for a driver because it's their birthday and you want them to
Yeah.
have a good
That has happened before, yeah.
Are we done with this part, or?
Now, as we are a all-girls podcast shining a light on Formula One, and we are for the girls and by the girls, we wanted to take a little moment to shine a light on the women in Formula One and its respective series.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting article the other day. I believe it was Stephanie Carlin of Rodin Carlin. They're a British manufacturer in Formula 2, which is obviously a feeder series to Formula 1. And she mentioned that it was not a lack of ability which made up the lack of women in Formula 1, but rather a lack of role models and examples. And it leads you to think, is there just a lack of opportunity for women? Because you can see that these female drivers, these women drivers, you know, they have the ability to race. You see them in the feeder series, you see them in F1 Academy, and you think they have the ability to race. And even Formula 1 drivers have said out in the past that women have the ability to be racing in this discipline. But you look at, there's not many role models for them. When you speak to Formula 1 drivers, they always say, you know, Alonso made me want to get into F1, or, you know, Vettel made me want to get into F1, or, you know, all these older drivers, they always have a role model and an example, and the women don't have that. And there's also just in general a lack of opportunity and lack of funding, and it really, you know, drags them down and stops them achieving what we can achieve.
It's a shame. Sometimes they like to note that Susie Wolff was an inspiration to them, but even Susie Wolff couldn't quite get into Formula 1 herself, which I always find gutting. I really like Susie Wolff and I really wish she did get there, but I believe she was the last woman to take part in a Formula 1 weekend.
I believe so.
Also, when women are racing, you know, it gets mentioned a lot, but there's always a lot of negative backlash on social media, and although there's loads of positive messages, when you are that racer, you are going to, you know, fixate on the negatives more than the positives, I think, because when people are criticizing you all the time, it is going to get down on you. And I feel like more should be done to stop the kind of to stop people being so mean on social media, you know, to really think before they tweet something.
There is sort of a double standard, because when a driver in Formula 1 crashes, it happens every week, you know. Okay, yeah, there's a lot of negative things said about them, but it's never to do with their gender, it's to do with, you know, maybe their driving ability. And even that isn't very fair. But when a woman crashes in the F1 Academy, you will go online and a lot of the comments will be, oh, well, she only crashed because she's a woman. Oh, like, she just can't really drive that well because she's a woman. I just think it's very biased. Why would you say that about her but not about one of the men that crashed in Formula 1 and do so every week?
Definitely, yeah. And it sets an awful precedent, because then it makes these ideas, you know, commonplace that, oh, well, women can't race in F1, but they definitely, I believe, have the ability to. And if people just gave them a chance and gave them the right funding and the right opportunities, I think we could see a massive shift in women at least trying to get into F1 over the next sort of 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I mean, going back to the point that you made about like the jokes and stuff, there was a clip from a podcast that went around a couple of weeks ago on social media that made me really kind of upset and very disappointed, from Daniel Ricciardo, who he went on a podcast done by Barstool Sports, and I'm not going to go into it too much, but just if you don't know the context behind why Barstool Sports is kind of trash, then just Google it because there's so much detail. But he went on one of the podcasts, and there was a segment about making jokes, and one of them was about women not being able to drive in Formula 1, and the woman driver was on the way to like the thing and she crashed or something, and he laughed at it, and I found that really kind of disrespectful and also really disappointing that somebody at such a high level in Formula 1 and someone who is idolised by many, you know, as the face of Drive to Survive, and you know, just a very well-liked driver. I find it really disappointing that he would go on and kind of make and laugh at a joke like that. And it kind of just shows really that we've got a long way to go before women in motorsport and women in F1 in particular are truly accepted. But hopefully with F1 Academy and with the introduction of a lot more women into F1 team academies, then hopefully we'll start to see some of that kind of being eradicated. But it's just a shame that I think some leaders of the sport just don't seem to grasp that their kind of words and their actions kind of have consequences on things like this too.
And also they have to think that when they have this position where they are in the elite level of motorsport, and loads of people were, you know, listening to that podcast and were really taking in what Ricciardo was saying, you have to think, even if it was just a joke and you didn't mean it, think how it could be interpreted by other people, especially by, you know, young girls who maybe looked up to him. And when you have this position, you have the chance to do something really amazing and really, you know, change the precedents set and the ideas that people have, and you're choosing to spread the wrong message. It really is quite disheartening.
I do think it's important to just note that a couple of the drivers are very pro-women in the sport. Lewis Hamilton obviously campaigns for it quite a lot and met all the F1 Academy drivers, but also before he retired, Sebastian Vettel did a lot for women in the sport. He set up his own, I'm pretty sure was it Saudi Arabia? He let all the women come and go-kart there around the track. And it's little touches like that that I think are really positive, especially for young girls watching the sport, as well as the addition to more female commentators. You've got Naomi Schiff, you've got Natalie Pinkham, you've now got Bernie Collins. Like, there's a lot of female voices that are present in a Formula 1 weekend. If there isn't any drivers, at least we are listening to girls speak about it too.
Definitely. I mean, growing up watching a lot of sport, it was very rarely I'd ever see a woman on the TV, to the point where if I saw one, I would get, you know, shocked and really happy. I remember seeing a female commentator or presenter on the darts once, and I just thought, that's amazing, I've never seen that before. And it's so lovely being, you know, a young girl and seeing this, and it really made me feel like, okay, I'm a little bit more confident now, maybe I can do this. So it is so important also to give women these opportunities and these jobs.
Speaking of opportunities, there has actually been a few recently. I know that McLaren have signed Bianca Bustamante as their newest addition in the driver development programme, and Williams have signed 17-year-old Leah Block to represent them in the F1 Academy season.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a great addition and it's great for both of them too. And I remember seeing a couple of weeks ago there was some posts that I believe it was Autosport put out about the most influential female drivers and females in motorsport, and Bianca Bustamante ranked very highly. And considering that she is still very young, it's impressive the following that she's got and the amount of backing that she has, and now being part of the McLaren family, hopefully that will open a lot more doors for her, and she'll be able to use the opportunities and have a very long and great career in motorsport wherever it may take her.
Yeah, and just touching on that, is the F1 Academy is actually great for these young female drivers. Bianca is only 15, Bianca's only 18, But the prize for the F1 Academy was great, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. My favourite of the drivers, Marta Garcia, she won with Prema, and thanks to Prema as well as Pirelli and the chassis manufacturers of the F1 Academy. She now has a fully embossed seat in the Formula Regional Championship, so it's great to see that, you know, these kinds of things are allowed, because these things are being granted, because one of the biggest issues that we see that prevent people from progressing further in motorsports is the lack of funding, because the amount that some seats cost is insane, and there has been a lot of talk about how eventually it might end up just turning into whoever has the most money can make it the furthest in motorsport, which is something that of course we don't want to see. But with kind of a fund and an incentive like this, then I think that's great that she's going to be able to get that and have that opportunity, and hopefully this is something that continues throughout the series, so we get to see more people from what has to be said is a very kind of small pool of drivers get the better opportunities, and hopefully that will last longer until maybe one day in the future somebody can make it all the way to F1.
I think it's a great touch by the F1 Academy, because I actually did a dissertation as part of my application for uni on women in Formula One, and when it comes to funding, it's almost circular in a way. It's because they don't have the funding, and you need funding to get into Formula One to afford the seat, but people won't risk funding them because they don't think, not that they don't think a woman will make it, but they don't want to take the risk of funding a female seat in Formula One when there's no evidence that they've made it before perhaps. So it's a very negative circular structure, and sort of one we need to break. And I think this is a great example of how it's being broke. They are taking the risk, and they're sort of saying, and you know, many sponsors do take the risk and do fund women, especially when they are racing in feeder series, but it's a really great example to show potentially bigger sponsors that it's worth it, take the risk. They are going to make it one day.
Definitely. And I mean, the way that I look at it is realistically, because a lot of people say, oh, why isn't there any women getting the opportunity if they are good enough? And the way I always explain it is, say you take 100 kids from karting, you'd potentially have, based on, I don't know, just a generic thing, maybe you'll have 20 women as part of that 100 group, and then as they advance through the series, is maybe 50 of them will advance up to actually getting towards Formula cars, and then even more will advance through Formula 4, Formula 3, Formula 2, Formula 1. But because there was 80 boys to the 20 girls, that ratio is just generally going to get a lot less as you go further and further up the ladder, and there needs to be kind of that bigger opportunity for the minorities to be able to get through, and hopefully by those girls breaking the barriers and smashing the glass ceiling, then we'll start to see more people trying out karting, and then therefore a bigger pool of people to choose from who get better opportunities.
Lovely.
So we've got Las Vegas coming up this weekend, as we've already mentioned. Quite excited, I think, is the general consensus here, although how would you say you feel? Would you say it's more going to be like a show, or would you say it's going to be kind of, you know, a good race to look forward to? Because I think we kind of have a little bit of a divide here, but I know I'm excited, but I don't know whether it's going to live up to the hype surrounding it.
I'm very hyped personally. I feel like it's getting a lot of criticism for kind of being a spectacle, but Vegas has always been a spectacle. You know, since it became really big, I think in like the 50s or 60s, Vegas has always been full of glitter, you know, glamour, loads of flashing lights, and I feel like it's only one weekend a year. Why is it getting this much hate? I don't know. I feel like it's going to be fun, and people need to give it a chance. You know, maybe the F1 races in Vegas in the past, you know, the ones in the car park, maybe they weren't that great, but this one is so much bigger, and I feel like I'm really hyped for it. You know, I think the details on the curbs are beautiful. They got a lot of hate. I don't know why. And I think, you know, despite all the criticism that's been thrown its way, you know, over the opening ceremony, I feel like it's got the chance to really be quite a glamorous event. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, not to dampen the parade, but I think if Formula 1 is going to go to Vegas, then they should adopt the Vegas culture and, you know, like you say, make it a glamorous and glitz event. That's fair enough. It is just, well, okay, so with the opening ceremony, Formula 1 did post it on TikTok, and their caption to the video was, "May the odds be ever in your favour," which is a quote from the film The Hunger Games. And so I just think it's more sort of evidence that this Vegas weekend is about the show, it's about the entertainment, it's about maybe the money. I don't necessarily think it's about the racing. I think that's probably been the least talked about thing throughout the whole sort of build up, is the actual racing, as opposed to the event and the show and the glitz and glamour. The, you know, we've got special outfits in some of the drivers, things like that. I just think perhaps captioning the videos with lines from a film is sort of further evidence that it is based off a show. I also think there's a lot of commentary online that linking it to the Hunger Games, which, you know, I don't think it is like the Hunger Games. I just think it's very sort of comedic that they are playing this big, especially the opening ceremony was crazy. I mean, do you know what? It was very fun to watch, actually. I did enjoy watching it, but perhaps I enjoyed watching it because of the show, the sort of showcase element, as opposed to the fact that I'm a Formula 1 racing fan.
I found it very funny to watch the expressions of the drivers as they came up on the podium, because you could tell the ones that were really like kind of up for it and the others who just weren't. And I'm just going to read this. I think it's going to be fairly obvious who said this, but a certain F1 driver has said, they are still going to make money whether I like it or not, but I'm also not going to fake it. I voice my opinion in positive and negative things. That's just how I am. Some people like show a bit more. I don't like it at all. I just grew up looking at the performance side of things. I like to be in Vegas, but not so much for the racing. So now, any ideas who has potentially said that quote?
Verstappen did not look like he was enjoying the opening ceremony. No hate to him at all, but he just didn't look like it was his kind of vibe. But, you know, maybe it will just be, you know, he can just get on with his race and enjoy the spectacle happening around him.
Yeah, I do partly actually agree with Verstappen. I get where he's coming from, because I imagine, look, you're one of the greatest in your field. You're like coming to this country, you're going to race here. It's a brand new track, and everyone's like, oh, look at, like, you know, look at this cool like thing that we're rising through podiums, and look at all our nice little outfits and things like that. I imagine if you're like an amazing driver, you want people to look at your craft and not the showbiz. You want people to sit and think, wow, you're a good racer, and not, oh, do you know what, the track looks really good in this light, and things like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, yeah. And I do have to say though, as much as I couldn't keep a straight face watching the opening ceremony, I enjoyed it a lot more than whatever the Miami Grand Prix had going on this year. Yeah. I can't believe they oh god, I just punched my microphone. I can't believe they compared the fake marina to the curbs. Like, the curbs actually look nice, and you know, they're just playing on the theme. Meanwhile, the fake marina, it's like trying to be Monaco but not. So I don't understand why that's getting the same amount of criticism in comparison, when it's really just, it's kind of just on brand for Formula 1 in Vegas, and it's not really doing anything to kind of add or take away, really, because when we're watching the racing, we're not going to notice the curbs, as beautiful as they may be, but we're not going to notice the curbs, but we will notice the fake marina trying to be Monaco in Miami every time they go past that corner. So I just don't get that kind of criticism, but I'm looking forward to it. I am fairly hyped for it. Not so hyped for it being 6 a.m. our time, but
it's not the best one.
Yeah, but it's exciting, and I mean, many drivers have voiced their how much they wanted to race in Vegas. Daniel Ricciardo was one of them. I remember Nico Rosberg said that he'd come out of retirement if Las Vegas got put back on the calendar. So Nico, we are waiting for you wherever you may choose to end up. But I'm fairly looking forward to it. But the one thing I'm not looking forward to is how you compared it to the Hunger Games with the tagline that they used, and it may well be the Hunger Games, especially given the talk around the tyre temperatures. The track's going to be as low as 4 degrees, and also the layout of the track where the pit lane comes right out into the middle of turn 1. So that could make things very interesting and very precarious for the drivers.
And they have, very long straights in Vegas. When you think about going back to the racing, this could be very interesting for some teams who, aren't particularly good on the straights. I know that you'd want to talk about Mercedes, maybe.
Yeah, look, I don't think we're going to do that amazing this weekend. At no fault of the drivers' talents, I think both George and Lewis are great. I think that the car lacks straight line speed, and looking at the Las Vegas circuit, I don't actually see the point of us sort of turning up, because I don't think we're going to be good enough to compete with many teams, really, with our straight line speed. The track temperature, all of these things are just going to fall against us, and to be honest, I think it would be less embarrassing if we didn't race.
I second that as a Charles Leclerc fan, as I'm believing that he's going to have to take an engine penalty, and I'm just like, if you're starting at the back here, you may as well just not bother. Although if it is a race that turns out to be a war of attrition, kind of survival with the fittest, maybe starting at the back might not be the worst thing. Keep yourself out of trouble, and who knows what the race might come to them if he does have to take that engine penalty. So I think it could be it could be negative, it could also be a positive. It just kind of depends on how the race plays out.
I have seen that the sphere on the in the middle of the circuit is going to be on throughout the race and sort of broadcasting different things on it, and I have actually seen a few tweets saying, who do you think will be the first driver to get jump scared by the sphere and crash out? So perhaps there's that to take into consideration, as well as the track temperature in the straights.
Yeah, there's a lot of show around this GP, but I feel like if the racing is really good, it could redeem the fans' ideas of Vegas, and they might become really, really pro Vegas. So hopefully the racing's really good, and I don't sound like a complete fool.
No, credit where credit's due. They don't do things half-hearted. Formula One have gone full out. They've fully immersed themselves in Las Vegas culture. I like it a lot more than Miami have sort of done up their track. So I think fair play to them.
Yeah, and I think we're all going to be on Celeb Watch this weekend just to see who turns up.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, that is true. So, who has any crazy predictions for this weekend?
I don't know if mine's crazy, but I'm going to go for it. At least one driver from the top 3 teams, so Red Bull, Mercedes and Ferrari, will DNF during the race. Purely because I'm thinking that there's going to be a lot of DNFs. Whether it be true or not, come the race, we'll see. But just purely because of the factors that are going on around the race, I do think there's going to be a lot of crashes, a lot of driver errors. So I do see at least one of those cars kind of falling victim to it, especially when, Ferrari and Mercedes are in their fight for P2. And I mean, Sergio Perez is great on street tracks, so maybe we might see a very rare Verstappen mistake. I highly doubt it, but you can never rule things out, especially considering he's been so critical of the track. Maybe he'll just decide on lap 1, no, I don't really like this. Maybe he just won't be bothered to race. But I just see that kind of happening this weekend. I see there being a lot of DNFs, and I see the top cars kind of falling victim to it, and hopefully that means that we'll get a kind of a random outside podium chance this weekend, although I wouldn't bank on that too much as well. But I can definitely see there being a lot of DNFs and the front runners being involved in that.
And are you bold enough to predict which 3 front runners that might be?
You know what, I'm going to make us all miserable and say it's going to be Charles, Lewis and Max.
Won't be a great podcast the week after.
I do feel like Max has got a very no nonsense attitude to certain things, but he might lighten up and really start to enjoy Vegas. I know I jinxed this driver last time, but I'm going to say Ricciardo's going to do really well and finish in the top 10 and get some points. He's been very excited to race in Vegas. missed out almost, I think it was twice, to race in Vegas when he left McLaren and, you know, was out of a seat, and then he came back in mid-season, and then he, you know, had that issue. He broke his wrist, and you were thinking, oh, this man's never going to get to race in Vegas, but now he is, and hopefully a top 10 finish for him.
I'm going to go with a double McLaren podium. I think that they have been doing incredibly well the last few weeks. I think had it not been for the unfortunate contact last week, Piastri would have definitely been up there with Norris. So I believe that, I'm not sure what positions, whether that be P1, P2 or P2, P3, and then probably we will be joined. Yeah. They'll probably be joined by Max Verstappen, but that is the podium that I'm predicting for Las Vegas.
I'm surprised that none of us have really gone for a Checo win, purely because it's a street track. But are we thinking that the luck's not with him for the run-in for the end of the season?
Is a master of street tracks, but I think when you think about the cold tyre temperatures and the long straights, are we going to see a Baku-style tyre blowout situation happening down these long straights? That possibly might happen, and that might be at the fault of many drivers. Well, not at the fault, but be the downfall of many drivers in this race.
Yeah, and I also think perhaps the battle for P2 with Lewis might give him too much pressure. I know that they had a press conference and Lewis smiled at him and said that I'm coming for you in reference to P2. So perhaps the pressure will be too much for him this week. Now, for your timings this weekend, practice 1 is on the 17th of November at 4:30am. Yep. And practice 2 is at 8am. So both those will be while I am still asleep.
We have practice 3 on the 18th, which is the Saturday, and that's at 4:30am. And then we have qualifying for 8am on the same day, so get your alarms ready.
And the race, as previously mentioned, will be on Sunday morning at 6am, as it is a night race down the Las Vegas Strip. So those are your timings for you this weekend.
Yes, and don't forget that you can follow us on Instagram, TikTok and Twitter at the F1 Era. You can also contact us by the F1 Era at outlook.co.uk. Is that right?
You can also contact us on Twitter under @Nerve Radio, or you can email studio@nervemedia.org.uk, and of course you can find us on Spotify under Nerve Podcasts.
We thank you so much for tuning in this week. We can't wait to be back and talking to you next week and discussing all things Vegas.